Hello, friends. I hope you've had a great day. I think we've had a pretty good clinic day here. I'm actually headed soon to the soccer field to see my little one there. I hope you're going to get to enjoy some family time too. So, I wanted to chat today about protein. If you have seen us in the weight loss clinic, or even if you're one of my primary care people, you know that you hear the word protein from me a lot. If you've watched my videos, especially the ones recently with my daughter in the Chopples, you've heard Mommy likes to talk about protein, and I do, but it's with very, very good reason. And I came across an article. It's not really a study, it's talking about a whole bunch of different studies, and it's basically giving the clinical evidence for using a protein focused diet to achieve weight loss. So the article starts just with talking about the fact that weight loss can be achieved through energy restriction, which is true. I don't deny that if you restrict your energy, your total energy intake, you are going to lose weight. But there's a problem in that. And the problem comes in that post weight loss, so you work really hard, you lose all this weight, and all of a sudden you can't maintain it. You start to have significant weight rebound as soon as you start trying to increase your intake of energy or calories. But even sometimes before then, you lose weight using that calorie restriction, and then all of a sudden you start gaining weight at that level and you have to restrict further. And it's like, kind of, where does it end? And that's a big conundrum in the weight loss world. Also, what we see is that diets that just restrict caloric intake, they take all of the energy, all of the calories down, protein, fat, carbohydrate, all of that. You do have a decreased fat mass, but you also have a reduction in free fat mass. So that means muscle, bone, tendons, ligaments, all of your connective tissue. And the other crappy thing is it lowers your resting energy rate or expenditure. So, the resting energy expenditure is how many calories or how much energy do you burn when you're sleeping, when you're not doing anything else, when that's all your body's doing. And if you're restricting total energy intake, total calorie intake, that lowers, which makes it even harder to maintain that weight loss afterwards. So all of this goes into one big ball of it's hard to maintain weight loss if you're doing it through a calorie restriction. Now, can you achieve it? Absolutely. Is it the best option? I don't think so. And this article goes into why that is. So it is titled Clinical Evidence and Mechanisms of High Protein Diet Induced Weight Loss. The main author is Moon and Co. K-O-H. And it is published in the Journal of Obesity and Metabolic Syndrome. It was published in 2020, so not too terribly long ago, but a couple years ago. So what this is it is looking at all of the clinical trials, explaining kind of the connection between these trials, and then also giving you the mechanisms, actions of why protein focused is the best option for weight loss. So I'm not going through all of the clinical trials that they put out, but I'm going to hit a couple of the highlights. First, let's talk about the RDA for protein. So RDA is the recommended dietary allowance, or the amount the government thinks that we should consume in protein. And that rate is currently set at 0.8 kilograms or grams per kilogram of body weight. So take your body weight in pounds, convert it to kilograms, and then multiply that times 0.8, and that tells you your recommended dietary allowance. Now, this is based off of the ideal body weight, not necessarily the weight you are at that moment. So, if you weigh 300 pounds, but you should really weigh 200 pounds, then you're doing your RDA based off of that. What does this look like for most people? That RDA of 0.8 grams per kilograms ends up being between 45 and 56 grams per day. And I can tell you that there's not been a single person that's walked through my door for a weight loss consult that I've recommended that amount of protein. I personally consume about double of that in a day, and it's how I control my satiety. So let's go through a couple of the trials that they mentioned in this study. And I promise you, I will butcher these authors' names because, well, they're kind of hard to say. The first one, it appears like it's saying Wycherley. That's Wycherley. Wycherley, maybe. So this was a meta-analysis. He took data from 24 different randomized controlled trials, and randomized controlled trials are kind of the top of the top for research. And you can say if it's found through a randomized controlled trial, it's more likely to be scientifically accurate and something that we can put into practice. So what Wycherley did is he took 24 of these studies and compiled all their data together to come up with the amount of test subjects that he did. And he had 1,063 participants worth of data on there. So what he did is he put all of these individuals on an isocaloric energy restriction. So big fancy words, basically he gave them all about the same amount to eat, and it was a reduced amount to eat. Makes sense? But he split them. He split them into the high protein diet and the standard protein diet. Now, the high protein people took in between 1.07 and 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, so roughly double of what the recommended standard amount is. And the control group took in 0.5 to 0.8, basically. What his findings were is that the individuals on the high protein diet, the one that is double the recommended dietary allowance, showed a significant reduction in body weight, triglycerides, and a significant increase in fat-free mass. That's the muscle, the bones, the tendons, the ligaments, the connective tissue, and a increase in resting energy expenditure. So the amount of energy you burn at rest. So the people that consume more protein, all calories the same between the ones who were not consuming the same amount of protein, had more fat loss, better improvement in triglycerides, better improvement in muscle mass, and better improvement in metabolism compared to just the standard people. The next one I want to talk about, and I'm not even sure I'm going to attempt these names. The first name is SKOV, Scalp maybe, and Weigel, Weigle. So this was an ad libitum diet. So basically, they were not given their food. They were not told exactly what to eat as far as eat this chicken, eat this broccoli, that kind of thing. People were allowed to kind of live and choose, but they were given instructions on what their macronutrient ratios should look like. So they were taught this is what this amount of protein looks like, and this is how much you should consume. Only told this with protein. They were not told anything about fat. They were not told anything about carbohydrate. They were strictly instructed on how much protein they should consume. And the people in the high protein diet were getting about 25% of their total energy intake from protein. And then there was this high carb end that consumed about 12% in protein. And then the control group, they did have a control. So they basically, I guess I misinformed you in the beginning. They did inform them about protein, fat, carbohydrate, in that they had one group that was focusing on protein, one group that was focusing on carbohydrate, and then the other one that was just the control group doing kind of whatever they wanted to without instructions. So high protein was 25% protein, high carb group was 12% protein, and the control, there was no set. What they found is that the high protein group compared to the high carb group had decreased body weight and decreased fat mass. And this was compared to the control, and the high carb group had both of those. They took it further and they looked at weight maintenance. So what happens after the initial weight loss? And what they found is that those on the high protein group had increased satiety even while losing fat mass, and they maintained all of their muscle mass. That's super important because you don't want to lose weight and just be a saggy glob. You want to be lean and mean and firm and more toned. It's about the composition, not necessarily about just the number on the scale. So the high protein diet, it sounds great, but what about that weight regain that happens? And there was actually a study that looked at this. They specifically looked at a high protein diet after weight loss. And this was Westertrup and Plantiga. Yeah, I told you I'm going to butcher all of these names. There was a lot of them in here. So they basically took their group and they had a 4-week weight loss intervention that was a very low caloric weight loss intervention. This study didn't point out exactly how much that was. What I envision is some of these plans that take you down between 500 to 800 calories a day, almost like the meal replacement studies and things like that. But it was a extremely low, very low calorie diet. And they did this for 4 weeks, and they had 148 persons. After that study, protein was slowly increased. So they had initial weight loss, and they're basically adding nutrition back into their diet and seeing what happens. And so they slowly increased the protein over 3 months to get it up to 48.2 grams. So note that that's barely in the recommended dietary allowance. So these people, before they got to that much, I can't imagine how much struggling they were doing with their satiety, but whatnot. They were trying to get it to a total of 18% of their total energy intake. So even while they're adding this protein back, it should be noted that they are still on a calorie restricted diet while they're increasing and adding proteins back in there. But what they found is, as they started to refeed protein to these individuals who had been on this very low calorie diet, the people who were given more protein versus the ones that were capped on the lower amount showed 50% less weight regain. So everybody was gaining weight as they added back. And remember, the high protein is still just getting you to the RDA here. But if the people focused on protein, even though they're gaining weight, they're gaining less weight than those that weren't focused on protein. Wonder what would happen if you ramp that protein up even further. Yeah, I could tell you, but that would mean you wouldn't have to come see me for weight loss. Okay, so of those that regained weight, looking at these, the people who were on the protein increase, when they looked at the composition of what they gained fat-free mass. So they were putting back on muscle, bone, connective tissue, things like that. And people who were not on the increased protein, as they're refeeding and adding that back in, they gained fat mass. And that's a completely different body composition. One is more favorable than the other, I can guarantee you. So the conclusion of that kind of synopsis of the trials was that many trials have shown that consuming more protein than the RDA recommends induces higher amounts of weight loss and improved body composition, regardless of the energy intake or the caloric intake. Now, they talked about two concerns, and I can tell you these are concerns that people bring up every day in the clinic when I tell them to focus on protein. The first one is it going to hurt my bones? Basically, the idea is that if you're consuming a high amount of protein, it's going to block the absorption of certain acids that is going to help you with your bone reabsorption of calcium and things. So they looked and they found in a meta-analysis. So this meta-analysis looked at another meta-analysis. So looked at a whole bunch of studies and got 74 randomized controlled trials together. And they found no harm compared to the standard intake of protein for bones. And in fact, it is a well-known thing that our elderly population, as they decrease protein in their diet, they lose bone tissue and develop osteoporosis, increasing their risk for fractures. Now, I can tell you for myself, I did, and this is not part of the study that I'm talking about, but for myself, I'm in my 40s and I had a normal bone density, but when it was kind of lower in normal, when I purposely increased my protein to pretty much double or maybe even slightly double what the RDA recommended, my bone mass actually rose. I have also seen this in a family member. I have a very close family member who already had osteopenia, which is the stage before osteoporosis. So the bones are starting to thin and thinning faster than they should. When this person, it was a female, increased her protein above what the RDA recommended, or the recommended dietary allowance, she reversed her osteopenia and put her bone density back into a premenopausal place. So I've seen it with my own eyes many, many times. So the other one is kidneys. And I hear this a lot. If I eat that much protein, it's going to hurt my kidneys. My kidneys are going to be bad. I have diabetes. I got to watch out for my kidneys. I have high blood pressure. I got to watch out for my kidneys. So they found another study that looked at 307 obese adults, and they all started with a normal renal function. They followed them over 2 years on a high protein diet, and there was no decline. Repeat, no decline in renal function. So their general finding was that a high protein diet is safe if your kidney functions are normal. Now, I will admit, if you are on dialysis, we have to watch your protein intake, but there's very little evidence that people, even in the early stages of renal issues, need to restrict their protein. In fact, most of our nephrologists don't even restrict our proteins until we're inching near dialysis or actually on dialysis. Side note, I had another client, this again is not part of the study, but another client, a gentleman who liked no fruits, no vegetables. He pretty much ate meat and bread, and we needed to control his blood pressure and his blood sugars and his weight. And so he actually chose to go on a carnivore diet. So he was eating only protein, meat and eggs, a little bit of cheese, only protein, full of water, that kind of stuff, and some coffee. That's pretty much what he had. He had already had stage 3A. So there's 4 stages, and then you go to dialysis. So he had already passed the first 2, was in stage 3A. Within 3 months, his renal functions had returned to normal. His blood pressures returned to normal, and we had to take him off of his blood pressure medicine. I think that goes to show you take the other health conditions away and give the body good nutrition, it's going to fall back into normal if you can catch it soon enough. Now, if he had waited till he got to 4B and stepping into dialysis, it would have been a different picture. And I hope he sticks with that change because, hey, man, to go from a really high renal function to a really low and to be able to do that just with your nutrition, it's pretty amazing. And to get off of medicines. So how does this work? They list several mechanism of actions on how this works. And the first has to do with that energy expenditure. So there's this term DIT, and it stands for diet-induced energy expenditure. So what this is the energy needs, so the energy needed to absorb the nutrient from the food that you eat, to metabolize the nutrient, and then to store the nutrient. So DIT is basically how you get in and burn and store the nutrient in question. So protein actually increases DIT and prevents decline in resting energy expenditure. This is not something that is specific to fat or to carbohydrate, only to protein. So protein, consuming more of it takes more energy to break it down and burn it. And it holds and doesn't let your energy metabolism, your resting energy metabolism drop, which is something that definitely happens and it's been proven in research to happen if you're just doing a calorie restricted diet. Because of this, because the protein takes longer to break down, because it takes longer for it to burn, and it's not dropping your resting metabolism, it increases your satiety. That's a cool thing. Next, let's talk about satiety hormones. So protein has been shown to increase 3 main satiety hormones, the hormones that make you feel full. Now, these are the hormones that the injectable weight loss medications worked on. So the hormones that control weight loss through an injection actually can be controlled through the food that you eat. Now, hang with me here. The main one is GLP-1 or glucagon-like peptide 1. That is something that goes to the brain and tells us that we're full, and it's signaled by the gut. It's the main one that's in those weight loss drugs, but protein actually triggers that as well. It also increases CCK, which is cholecystokinin. It's another one that tells you you're full, that you need to stop eating, and it increases PYY, peptide tyrosine. So all 3 of those go to help you feel full and satisfied, and the ingestion of protein, when it hits the gut, triggers the release of those hormones, and you feel more full and satisfied. But it goes a step further. Protein decreases ghrelin. So ghrelin is another hormone that is produced, and I call it the gremlin hormone because it makes you feel like you're hungry. It sits on your shoulder. It's like, I'm hungry, I need to eat. Protein suppresses the production of ghrelin. So you make less of the hormone that makes you feel hungry and more of the hormones that make you feel full just by increasing protein. There's something called the aminostatic hypothesis. Basically, this breaks down to increase amino acids, increase satiety. This is still a hypothesis. It's not been quite proven in research, but it could come into play. And the authors say this really needs a whole lot more research done on it to see if it is a true thing or not. But the basic idea is you have more amino acids in your system, you have more satiety. This one's one that when I read it, I had to read it twice, and I think I finally got it down. So gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis is the process in which your liver creates blood glucose or sugar to go out into your blood. Yes, it sounds like it'd be a bad thing. Why do you want more sugar in your blood? Well, hang with me here. Protein has essential amino acids in it. Some of these amino acids remain in the blood system after protein has been synthesized and broke down. Those amino acids go to the liver, and allow the liver to pump out blood sugar in the event that blood sugar goes low. So, because of these lingering amino acids that are hanging out in your blood system, your liver then can promptly and correctly produce the amount of blood sugar you need to stabilize your blood sugar without you getting that hangry feeling and having to eat. So, you're off the sugar roller coaster and you're making yourself more full because you're not getting hangry and you're not dependent on the glucose from food to keep your blood sugar stable. Your liver can do its job and do that for you. They have noted as well ketogenesis. Now, protein in itself does not put you in ketosis. That's more fat driven type process. However, what they said is in diets that purposely increase proteins and decrease carbohydrates, you produce ketones, specifically beta hydroxybutyrate. And what this does is it increases satiety. It suppresses a lot of those hunger systems and it helps you give you fuel so you don't need that sugar to burn, just like on the gluconeogenesis, but for a different thing. Your body can use ketones as fuel so you're not relying on the sugar and you feel more full because your body's not searching for fuel. It has it in the point of ketones. So therefore, it can help with satiety. So to wrap it all up, a high protein diet increases satiety, decreases the loss of lean muscle mass and tissues while increasing the loss of fat mass. It keeps you from reducing your resting energy expenditure as you lose weight, so you maintain your metabolism instead of it lowering, and it induces energy metabolism, that DIT, the dietary energy expenditure. All of that goes together to a better weight loss and a more sustainable weight loss if you continue to be on it. If you're losing weight during that plan, you can maintain that weight and maintain your satiety and not feel hungry. So I know it's hard. I know that a lot of people think they can't stick to a diet that's higher in protein, which usually decreases carbohydrates, but I think a lot of that has more to do with sugar and carb addiction and not the fact that you can't consume the protein. So I would ask you, if you're trying to lose weight and you're not really a protein person, is it worth it if it helps you keep muscle, burn the fat, and not feel so stinking hungry the whole time? It was for me, and I hope it is for you. All right, guys, I got a surprise for you next week. I'll post it early so you can see what we're doing. I hope you have had a good time on the episode and stay healthy until I see you next time.